Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode in the very long running series of 52 must see movies and why they matter, all based on this book here by Jeremy Arnold with a foreword by the late great Robert Osborne from Turner Classic Movies. And this time I am joined once again by my good friend Steven Billings. Steven, say hi to everyone once again.
Hi, Internet universe. Can't wait to talk about this. Kind of probably the most obvious of the movies that should be in this book, and it gets better every time I watch it.
Yeah, and if you can't tell by the title of this video, it is a big one, both figuratively and literally. This is Kurosawa's masterpiece, a masterpiece to me, a masterpiece to many people, and that is Seven Samurai. This film is one of the most essential classic foreign films of all time. You could probably throw the foreign out of it, just say films of all time. It is lengthy, it is epic, and it is fantastic. It runs 207 minutes, and for those of you who don't want to do that calculation, that is 3 hours and 27 minutes, which is a lot more than 2 hours and 27 minutes, I can tell you that. But upon a rewatch, Stephen and I were both saying how quickly this film moves. This film moves very, very quickly for a film of this length. There is no lag time throughout it. It is just a fantastic treat to watch. And for those of you not familiar with this film, we will be spoiling the heck out of this plot. So go spend the 3 hour plus and watch this movie. And if you don't care about that, stay here and we will tell you all about it. And this film is about exactly what the title says. Seven samurai are hired to help these farmers who are being attacked by bandits, who are being abused by bandits, and who are really desperately needing some form of protection. They can't do it themselves. They are not trained warriors at all. They are just trying to survive. They grow rice and barley, and they live in a very rural country, way out in the countryside of Japan, and they need some defending. So they go out and try to hire samurai, and they don't have any money. All they can offer is rice. That is it. And if you are a samurai at the time, you are typically a Ronin. A Ronin is basically a traveling samurai who is for hire, basically. He doesn't have a shogun or anyone to really pledge his allegiance to. He's just wandering the countryside, doing whatever, typically being hired to do work like this, or being hired into armies or gangs or anything like that. And they somehow, some way, get seven samurai to join their cause. And the seven samurai are portrayed by a few actors, but two of them are most important because they are two recurring actors in Akira Kurosawa films as well as Japanese films. These are probably two of the most well-known Japanese actors of all time. Takashi Shimura, who was in several Akira Kurosawa films, including Ikiru, which I think is one of the best films ever made, and Toshiro Mifune, who every time I think of samurai, I just think of Toshiro Mifune. He is the prototypical samurai. I mean, in this film, he is a delight to watch. He is the character who is the bit of a wild card. He's kind of crazy, unhinged, but if you need him in a fight, you got to get him. And the Takashi Shimura character is the leader. He is the kind of the old wise samurai who's kind of done. He's towards the end of his career. He doesn't really want to fight anymore, and that is kind of why he takes this up pretty much pro bono. You know what I mean? None of these guys are getting paid anything, and they are pretty much making the ultimate sacrifice in what would be a bit of a suicide run, if you will. These are a large group of bandits. There are only 7 of you. You are highly outnumbered. And this film, like we've mentioned, is very long, but it is fantastic. Steven, I know, is watching it for the second time. I'm watching it for the second time. Steven, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely obviously an influential film, getting into a little bit of its essentials, why it's essential. You know, it's a movie that's been redone many times. You know, the 70s version of Magnificent Seven, which is a Western version, American Western version of it. It also was remade again of the remake back just recently with Anton Fuqua. And also Pixar has remade it with A Bug's Life. And I'm sure there's other versions that I just can't think of. But
yeah, anytime you see a film where it's a small group of people trying to defeat a larger group of people, and the small group of people are on the good side, they're taking the plot from Seven Samurai. There was a film a few years ago called 13 Assassins by Takeshi Miike, I believe, and it's the same premise, but it's done with a modern filmmaking sense, and it is bloody and it's brutal, and the action is incredible. Highly recommend checking that out if you like foreign action cinema. But Seven Samurai is an all-time classic because it is a seminal work in the career of one of the greatest directors of all time, and that is Akira Kurosawa. He is someone who is monumentally influential on cinema, specifically for the generation of filmmakers that many of us know and love. Martin Scorsese, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, someone like John Milius, William Friedkin, people like that. That entire kind of 60s and 70s generation of filmmakers constantly go back and reference how influenced they were by Akira Kurosawa's films. They've always talked about them. They even helped Kurosawa fund some of his films later on through, I believe, Zoetrope, Francis Ford Coppola, Scorsese, and all of them. Scorsese's even in one of his films, Dreams. So this is a monumental figure, and this film is always one that is monumental. And I always like to say this, and I can't sugarcoat this enough or say this enough, without Akira Kurosawa, without his version of the samurai, specifically Seven Samurai, there is no Star Wars. Star Wars is not the way it is today at all. Star Wars is heavily influenced by the films of Akira Kurosawa, specifically Hidden Fortress, but really just his films in general about samurais. The Jedi are essentially samurais in space. That's always the way I've been viewing them. And also, these films are very much the Western of Japanese cinema. Stephen was saying that earlier, and it makes a lot of sense because Akira Kurosawa took the influence from American Westerns by John Ford and translated them into Japanese cinema. And it's very interesting how they've kind of overlap with one another. It's, you know, East meets West and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of genres that are inherent in their culture. They're not something that they're not like genre pictures where we come up with something off the top of our heads. These are genres that are made up of our culture, you know. The West and of course samurai were just real life things that turned into these huge genres. And it's, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's their West, it's their Wild West. And it's and I still, and there's a lot of other directors that have done a lot of other great work in the samurai genre, but his stuff is just, to me, especially Seven Samurai, it instead of being more you know, like more bloody and more, you know, into the violent side, it's more about the characters, it's character driven, and it's about the personalities of these samurai that makes his samurai movie special more than others, I think.
Yeah, oh, definitely. These are 7 people that we get to know over a long period of time, and as well as the other ancillary characters like the farmers or the villagers, whatever you want to call them. We get so engrossed in their world. We go on this adventure with them because the film is so long that I always found myself extremely sucked in, to the point where when the battle happens and the casualties come, it's like, damn, I can't believe that guy died. Damn, I can't believe that person died. And it really goes to show the power of this film. And just the filmmaking in general, I think, is exquisite. It's incredible. No one, I think, knows how to use the camera as perfect as Kurosawa. He knows just when to cut, just when to move the camera, how to move the camera, where to move the camera. When we need a close-up versus a wide-angle shot, there's so much greatness. And there's one scene in this film that I thought was particularly interesting, is when they capture is when there's three bandits come in, and they notice them because they have a lookout, and they go out and they kill two and capture one, and they bring him back to the village, and all the villagers want to kill him. They all want to kill this guy because he's part of the bandits that have been destroying their lives. So the Seven Samurai are trying to hold everybody back, and there's a close-up of just pure chaos. They're just holding people back, and then Kurosawa cuts to a wide shot of just all of the villagers just going crazy, all of them. And it's like, that's so. And then he cut back to the closer shot, and it's very interesting how he would be working that chaotic scene. You know what I mean? It's not like today where you would have POV shaky camera or anything like that. He's using the camera as kind of it's intended to be, kind of standoffish. He's notorious for letting scenes play out. There are a lot of scenes in this film that are done in long takes where it's just conversations. It's just conversations and maybe reaction shots, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, my favorite, I mean, honestly, and it might be boring, but I think my favorite uses of the camera were a lot of times just conversations. I mean, I think I've never seen a director more expertly use the whole field of vision and like shot composition better than Kurosawa does. Like, he literally, it's not like he overuses the frame where you got so much information in your face, like somebody like a Michael Bay or some of these big time action directors would do nowadays, would just throw crap in the frame just because they have the room for it. And also you got to think, they're not using the same aspect ratio. They're using a smaller aspect ratio in this film, and he uses it so expertly. Like, there's scenes where they're just talking, and you see your focus character right here, perfectly there in one side of the frame, and then in the back you see perfectly framed are two other characters he's talking to, and you don't ever. It doesn't look. It's perfect. I mean, like you said, he knows when to cut to other characters and move the camera for it to work, and this is why people love him so much.
Yeah,
he was ahead of his time as a director.
Yeah, his mise en scène is incredible. The way he stages his sequences, I think, are purposely done. He purposely puts people in the frame exactly where he wants them to be and exactly where they're supposed to be. And like Steven said, this film came out in 1954, right around the time widescreen lenses were about to start being used, and widescreen was starting to be exhibited in movie theaters in order to, keep up with television. But he was still sticking to that 4:3 aspect ratio. And it's really interesting how he's able to move the camera and make everything feel so epic, especially in the action sequences. The last hour of this film is essentially all dedicated to this final confrontation. And this confrontation it's not just one epic battle. You know what I mean? In modern films, everything's leading to that one epic battle. No, this one took place over a couple of days, and there was strategy involved, and it's very nuanced, and it's very thought out. There's nothing in this film that doesn't feel planned. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't feel spontaneous. There's a reason why everyone's doing what they're doing. Granted, the Toshiro Mifune character kind of just does whatever he wants. He's kind of crazy, kind of wild, and he provides a lot of comedic moments in this film. I mean, there's one moment where he tries to ride a horse that they tell him, don't ride it. It won't be able to bear your weight. It's just a plow horse, just a workhorse. And he tries to ride it, and he ends up falling off of it, of course.
Yeah. I was going to say,
he gets all mad, and then there are great scenes with him and kids who keep teasing him and stuff like that. And there's a lot of heart to this film because it goes really into what it is to be a very poor person in late 16th century Japan. These are very poor farmers who, like I said, have no money, just have the food that they grow. Their harvest time is their life.
Yeah,
we see a lot of their concerns when it comes to just getting samurai in. They have a huge debate whether they should actually hire the samurai, if it's a good idea or not. And they're still dealing with like village elders and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That's who they makes the decision. So we're dealing with a long time ago, a culture that is far removed from ourselves. Yet Kurosawa is able to tell us enough about them for us to get interested in their plight.
Yeah, I mean, he, you know, to me, that one of the most interesting thing, you know, getting back to kind of like how his samurai films are more character driven. You know, also with this film, it's about the social structure. About you got farmers, you got the very poor people, and you got the clash with the samurai. You know, which in that time, you know, a lot of of course, this rival, these bandits were former samurai that have now turned into these thieves and bandits and are now just terrorizing villages. And, you know, so that makes most people scared of samurai. So even hiring samurai for them is it's a scared prospect, because they don't know if they can trust them. And even after they've let them in to their village and are letting them help them, there's still moments throughout the film where there's a clash, specifically, one of probably my favorite scene of the film, where Mifune's character brings back things that they found, like some armor from other samurai, and of course he brings that in and he thinks he's done something great, but then the other samurai are like, well, they had to kill samurai to get this, and they're upset about it. And then Mifune, who we don't really know much about his past until later, but basically he gets upset. He's like, these people, the only reason they killed these samurai was because these samurai are raping and killing their people. Like they're only defending themselves, and come to find out, he's not a samurai. He used to be one of these people. And that's what makes this character so great.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things with his character, because specifically the scene you're talking about, we learn that he is from he used to be a farmer, or at least from a farming family. He may not even really be a samurai. There's a scene.
I don't think he is.
Yeah, there's a scene early on where they have pretty much everybody recruited. They have essentially 6 out of the 7, and they find him, and he brings in this family tree, saying, "Oh, look, my ancestry goes way back. Of course, I'm a samurai. Whatever." And then they're like, "This says you were born in 1571. This means you're 13 years old. What does it make any sense?" And he's like, "It is what it is." And you can also tell he's not a traditional samurai, almost right away, because he's so different than all the other ones. He gets drunk. He's wild. He's undisciplined. He has a sword that is way different than anyone else's sword that he has to carry on his back because it's so long. You know what I mean? And
I was going to say that in the special features of the Criterion Collection version, the one thing that was pointed out about a clue of him not really being a samurai is that typical samurais carry 2 swords. One that's their main sword, and then a shorter sword that's used for ritual suicide, if that ever comes to that. And in the movie, he doesn't have one. He just has his one long sword, and that's it. So I think he's obviously somebody that's built up a kind of almost a he wants revenge of sorts on samurai, but in the other hand, he respects them, or maybe just thinks that he's just become his own enemy, maybe. Or in a way, I don't know. It's a very interesting character.
He wants to be one because they're a better station in life. You know what I mean? They're kind of revered to a certain point, and you want the fame and the status that brings you. Apparently, especially if he is what we're led to believe he is from a poor farming family, the only upward mobility is to kind of lie your way up to the top. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of room for social mobility in feudal Japan. You're born poor, chances are you're gonna die poor. I mean, that's kind of the way it is, and he's been able to make a different station in his life, probably through lying, etc., etc. But what you were saying about these poor farmers with having all this samurai gear, if you will, yeah, they kind of admitted earlier on in the film that they you know, kind of killed kind of wandering samurai after a battle, because the events of this film take place after a civil war. You know what I mean? And it also doesn't really touch too much on the political climate of Japan at the time, but Japan doesn't really have much of a stable government. It's all kind of small governments, if you will. There's not a lot of policing going on, or things like that. That's why these bandits are able to do whatever they want. You can't call the police on them. There's no police to call. You have to either do what they say, try to fight them, or go get someone who can, which is what they do. And what is interesting about this film is also the way it's structured. It is structured in two parts. The first part is the first hour and 45 minutes, if you will. The second part kind of picks up after an intermission around the hour and 52-minute mark, and we continue onwards. And it's kind of like the first part is getting the samurai and then getting to the village, and the second part is kind of preparing the villagers for battle. And they have to train all these villagers, and some villagers don't want to do it. Some villagers, like I've said, are very wary of these samurai. There is another interesting kind of plot line going on in this film, where there is this young samurai, or this kind of samurai in training, and he is very rough around the edges. He's kind of a rookie, if you will. His name
is the Padawan.
What?
He is the Padawan, as we would call it.
Yeah, the Padawan, the apprentice, if you will. His name is Katsushiro, I believe that's his name, and he wants to be the apprentice of the head samurai in Takashi Shimura's Konbei Shimada. And right away he's like, I want to be your apprentice. I think you're awesome. You know, I want to. So he's like, you do have 7 samurai. I'm one of them. I can handle it. You know what I mean? He's very young, very naive, and he kind of has a relationship with one of the villagers, farmer's daughter, if you will, and it's kind of on the hush hush. It's on the down low, if you will, because this would disrupt things. This would prevent a lot. This would have a lot of chaos. And there is a confrontation in this film when he's eventually caught with this young woman, and it's an interesting kind of thing where the father is just beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. He was trying to prevent this the whole time. He took several steps to make sure that his daughter was not viewed as a young woman, but as a young a man instead of a woman. And he cut her hair short. He dressed her in men's clothing. He made her do all kind of hide away, because I'm guessing there is a history of people coming into this village and taking the women for themselves.
Well, yeah,
I think we saw that with another character as well.
Yeah, there's a scene in the film where they go out on a scouting type of mission, and they come upon a refuge of where a lot of the enemy samurai are held up in this place with other women, which were probably women that were taken from their village or in other villages, and then they set fire to it, and everybody starts coming out, and even one of the wives of one of the villagers has a chance to leave, but she's been so tortured by these samurai, beaten and probably raped, she goes right back into the fire and commits suicide, basically.
Yeah, she basically can't live with herself.
Yeah.
She can't live with herself, and she died. And that is also the first time one of the 7 samurai die. Because this is a very harsh film when it comes to dealing with the sacrifices that these guys are making. This isn't Hollywoodized. There are casualties. There are casualties, kind of heavy casualties that they talk about in the last moments of this movie. Essentially 4 out of the 7 samurais end up dying. One of them dies during this confrontation here. I think he gets burned, and he kind of like succumbs to burn wounds. And then 3 die during the battle, 2 by musket fire, and 1 during a fight. And unfortunately, Toshiro Mifune character is the last one to die, and he gets shot, but he ends up taking out the last guy who has a musket. And it's an interesting, I always thought, kind of cultural maybe social commentary on the changing of fighting or warfare, where the introduction of gunpowder and muskets is a lot different than the old ways of the samurai, where it was, of course, the samurai sword and bow and arrows and stuff like that. And I always thought that was very interesting that is the way that that ultimately 2 out of the 4 ended up dying.
Yeah,
And
I mean, they even go more into that with more recent films like The Last Samurai. Gets really into that.
With The Last Samurai, that actually takes place in the waning days of the samurai. The samurai would kind of go extinct, if you will, in the late 1800s, when Japan pretty much changes from their feudal ways and decides to modernize. They decide to become more industrial, and they put the old ways kind of to bed, and the samurais kind of dissipate. They go away. It's very interesting how long the samurais were around, and then all of a sudden they're gone. You know what I mean? It's only really been in the last 200 years or so that samurais haven't been around. It's very not done 200, 150, something like that. My math's not very good, but it's very interesting the history of the samurai, and this film does take place in a real year. It takes place
15
in
something.
1586 during the Sengoku period of Japanese history. If you ever have a chance to take a history of Japan, it's very interesting. Just Asian history in general is very interesting. I highly recommend that. But this film it's very interesting how Akira Kurosawa likes to go back into the history of Japan and extract stories from it. Same way, like we said, the Western would go back and extract stories from that. Some fictitious, some based on real events, etc., etc. That's kind of how the way movies are made. But what is interesting about this film, also, I just want to talk about, is they end up winning. They do end up winning. Like I said, 4 out of the 7 do die, but Takashi Shimura's character has a very interesting perspective of the end. He says, "We didn't win this. The villagers won it because the villagers are celebrating. They're reseeding for the harvest and all that stuff." And he's like, and there's a great shot of just the gravesite. Basically, there's the 4 mounds of where the samurais and then all the villagers that died during the fighting as well. And it just kind of shows you the hierarchy, like who made the most sacrifice. And it's like, we didn't win this, they did. So he feels like they lost because they did lose four great samurai.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, like you said earlier, he was somebody that really was kind of done with being a samurai, and part of that was probably because he'd seen a lot of his comrades, taken out over the years. And from the beginning, he was somebody that it was more, you could tell he was more of trying to get away from violence in general. Like he goes as far as shaving his head to save somebody from a situation at the very beginning of the film. He tries his best to do it without violence, but has to end up killing the person that he's trying to, the person is like basically keeping a woman and his child hostage in a hut somewhere, and has to end up killing them. But it is a very interesting, difference that in a lot of samurai films, the violence is glorified. But in this, that you're showing that the samurai are trying to be more pacifists if they can.
Yeah. And like I said, he's the first one to sign up, and he doesn't care about the glory. He doesn't care about the money. I don't even think he cares about the rice. He just is towards the end, and he's just looking to be useful. And that's kind of maybe a commentary on the way the Ronin life kind of is. It's very lonely, very long, and can be very desperate. And he mentions that he's been involved in battles before. You know what I mean? And it's really interesting how he develops the strategy. The combat strategy is. Hold on. Sorry, I'm dying over here.
Get yourself a drink there, Andrew. Take an intermission like the movie.
Yeah, there's an intermission. There's a lovely interlude. I was like, oh yeah, strategy. He decides to leave one area open and then block everything else around the village. kind of to give them a breach point so they can trap him inside. And he basically wants to pick him off in small doses, one at a time, maybe two at a time, until he gets to the final 13 and he's like, we're tired. They're probably tired too. We're not going to last much longer at this rate. These are farmers. These aren't warriors. We're barely functioning samurai as it is. So he's like, just let them all come in and we'll kill them all. And it's very interesting how that strategy ends up paying off, because it ends up working. And it goes to show how intelligent these samurais are when it comes to battle, when it comes to war. These aren't peasants. These are guys who are definitely educated, and if they're not educated perhaps with formal education, they're definitely educated with experience. And it's interesting how Kurosawa is just introducing us to this culture that is very foreign to us. You know, we're two people here in the United States in the 21st century, and we're being inundated with all of this old feudal Japan stuff, and I find it riveting. I just find it absolutely just fascinating and riveting, and it makes for great cinema on screen in the way it is told. In the hands of a lesser director, this wouldn't be as exciting or have had stood the test of time as it has.
Let me ask you something I thought about as I was watching it. You know, in a way, you know, especially with the way it's been remade over the years with Magnificent Seven, stuff like that, in a way you could say this film can be compared to like their superheroes, right? In a way, they're a group of heroes coming together to save people.
It's their Justice League.
Yeah, it's Japanese Justice League. Now, the question I have for you is just like we hear as a lot of problems with a lot of our superhero films where the villains are typically undeveloped and they're not great. Same kind of thing happens in this movie where most of the movie, you don't even, I mean, really, there is no real villain that is like personified in any way where you get to know a villain and you know, really get to see his villainy. They show up at the beginning, and then through most of the movie, you don't see him until the battle starts. And you never really get a moment with any of the villains in the movie. What do you think about that?
Because the whole movie is just an elongated character piece for the heroes.
Yeah,
it's everything told from their perspective, and we get to see a little bit when Toshiro Mifune's character goes and tries to get a musket because he feels jealous of the other guy who is a straight badass and just walks into the night or the mist and comes back and he's like, yeah, 2 more dead, here's your musket. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That's very similar to the scene in Mad Max Fury Road where Max walks over into the dark and all you hear is like explosions, and then he comes back and he's covered in blood, but it's not his blood.
Yeah, and then Mifune tries to do the same thing as the guy, but instead goes undercover and gets inside one of the enemy's armor, and then gets chased down by the enemy trying to get a musket, and it's like you're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, he kind of screws up. Like he's too rash with it. Like he sees 2 more of them die because they're trying to run away because they're like, screw this, these villagers aren't worth it. But then like I guess one of the guys leading the bandits is like, you know, if anybody leaves, we're gonna kill you. We're gonna kill you, cowards. And Mifune like goes over to the dead guys, steals their armor, puts it on, goes over to the guy with the musket, just starts talking to him like he's like one of them, and the guy recognizes him. He's like, you know, one of ours, and he tries to run away, but Mifune gets him. But then he ends up leading all the guys back into the village.
Yeah, I just found it to be interesting that, you know, like, and you know, I'm not trying to deface Seven Samurai in any way because I think it's a perfect movie, but it's just interesting. I just wanted to point out the kind of like double standard we put on some movies where we like to critique certain movies for not having a certain element to them, but then a masterpiece like this that we revere also doesn't have that element to it.
We also like have to keep in mind context of when movies are made and stuff like that. You know, modern movies are a lot different than movies made back in the 50s like this one. Action movies are made a lot different than this one. You know, there hasn't, back then there wasn't really an adherence to developing the enemies in any way. You know what I mean? It's just like they're the bad guys. The good guys are the guys we want to get to know, we want to get to love, and they have to defeat the bad guys. They didn't want to humanize the bad guys in any way.
But we still love these movies, is what I'm saying. Like people that are like us, we love these movies, but then there's people our same age that love that movie, that love Seven Samurai, but then want to complain about another movie that is made today that has some of the same, it's like same kind of elements, and then we're like, but they didn't do this, you know? Like
it's all a matter of perspective.
It's just weird to me, but that's a little bit off topic. I just thought that was an interesting thing that, you know, it is, and it's part of what makes the movie unique for me is that it's a movie about these characters and these heroes, and we don't even really need to know the bad guy at all. It's just, you know,
it's almost as if the bad guys are the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin in movies is something people are looking to get, whether it's an object or a place or whatever. It's always a destination, but the movie's really about the trip to the destination or to the object or whatever. That's the most interesting aspect, and the most interesting aspect of this film is the characters, is the journey, is them getting to the point where they have to confront these guys.
Yeah, it's the movie's about, you know, honor, and it's about, you know, I mean, even friendship and just, you know, like we were talking about earlier, you know, getting to know, you know, not being so prejudiced against everybody because of your class, what social class you're in. You know, these people come together and they do this thing together. And I, you know, even though at the end I would say that the villagers are a little bit in the disrespectful side, deciding to have a party.
Having a party, dancing, and I'm like, and it's almost as if like they don't understand what just happened at all. You know.
But it's still, yeah, it's a movie that has a lot of different facets in it, and it's a very it's not only an action movie, but it is a very conscious and sentimental movie at times. And another scene that goes along, I wanted to point it out before we wrap this up a little bit, but another scene that kind of goes with the Mifune character that I just, it's powerful, is there's a scene where a little boy who's been, you know, it was in a fire, and he pulls him out and has got him in his arms, and he's like, this was me. This was me. This happened to me.
Yeah, what happens is the mill gets, is the bandits come in and they start setting these houses on fire, these places on fire that aren't protected, because they can only protect so much that they have to just abandon certain places. And this couple comes with this baby, and they're like, oh, well, the guy's father or somebody's still over in that house, this old man, and still in. He won't leave it. He won't leave it. So Mifune says, "Okay, quickly go over there and get it." Like the bandits are pretty much here, and he ends up afterwards going in rushing to try to save them. And the only one who gets out is the mother and the baby. And the mother, I believe, passes out, or maybe she dies. Takashi Shimura's character, Kanbei, picks her up, and he's holding the baby, and he's like, This is me. Another thing, pretty much saying that he was from a poor farming family, and perhaps his parents ended up dying when he was really little. You know what I mean? But he has a really unique upbringing that we get kind of shades of throughout the film. And just going back to the young samurai who developed that relationship with that young girl, and the way her father kind of reacted to that, and the way the samurais react to that, basically is, they're young, let them be in love, because pretty much they could die at any moment. And that's the world that we're dealing with. This world of unpredictability where you can die at any moment, especially in this context, in this situation. These people could die tomorrow. They could die at dawn, they could die at night, whenever they're attacked. And what I also found was interesting is that at the end of the movie, the young samurai and the young woman aren't together. Like, she joins the villagers, he joins the samurai, and it's kind of like the heat of the moment, the passion of the moment, kind of caught them up in it, and that's kind of spurred their relationship, their little fling that they had, if you will. And now they kind of have to go their separate ways. I assume the young samurai is going to go off and continue being a Ronin, and she'll stay there and plant barley. You know what I mean? You know,
life goes on.
Life goes on at the end of this movie, and it's kind of a harsh life. And who knows if other bandits will show up in the future?
Yeah,
you know, that's very, very probable. It could very well happen.
Yeah, I mean, they talked about how, you know, it's happened, other villages have had to do the same thing before, hire samurai. It's not something that was just a one-time thing. It's something that's happened a lot, I'm sure. And for them, it just didn't seem like it would be possible because they didn't have anything to give. So, you know,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Some people could hire via money. Some people couldn't. They couldn't, but they lucked out. But there was a price paid. Like I said, 4 of the 7 died. Some villagers died. I mean, and the battle was very harsh and felt taxing. You know, like I said, it is like the last hour of the movie that we're dealing with it, and it takes place over several couple of days and nights. So, and especially the end, the final battle takes place in the rain and the mud, and it's just so dirty and like desperate, like life threatening. You know what I mean? Like people are, this is gut check time. It's
yep.
time to put up or shut up. You know what I mean? We're at the goal line. We gotta score. You know, whatever other metaphor you want to use, and at the end there's kind of a breathe easy sigh, but Kambe is like, it was it all really worth it? Was it all, you know, was the sacrifice really worth it? And it's a question that probably a lot of these samurais have to ask. But this is one of the greatest films of all time. I know it's one of my favorites. I believe it's one of Steven's favorites. It's one of the great films of legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa, amongst a fantastic filmography of works that he's really made films for everyone. And if you want to check out this film or check out any of his other films, please do so. Please do so, because he is amazing, and a lot of people don't know him because a lot of people aren't into foreign cinema. But if you want to get it, this is the Blu-ray here. Steven has his in the back. Lovely setup next to Buzz Lightyear. If you want this, or if you, of course, want to check out the rest of this list of all the movies we'll be doing, all 52 are in this book here. So check that out. There will be 52 of these videos. We've done quite a few already, so please check those out here on this channel. And you can find me personally on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions. Steven, where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Film Club Central. We do a lot of different stuff. We do a news show. We talk movies, a lot of different things. But yeah, this film is definitely essential, guys. It's, if anything, give it a chance. Give it one chance. Watch it once. If you don't like it, whatever. But it's one of the most influential films by one of the most influential filmmakers. If you call yourself a cinephile, you have to watch it at least once.
That is right. I couldn't agree more. And be patient with foreign cinema, because the payoff does tend to be there. So for me and for Dan Skip Allen, who runs this channel here and is the inspiration behind all of the videos we are doing, please check us out, check us all out, and support us and watch all the other videos we've been doing.